History is full of stories, but not all of them are true. From myths about famous leaders to legends about ancient civilizations, what you think you know might be wrong. In this video, we'll uncover 100 lies you were told about history, fact by fact, story by story. Get ready to see the past in a whole new way. Chapter 1. You were told Columbus discovered America in 1492, but that's not entirely true. Indigenous people had been living here for thousands of years before him. Norse explorers like Leif Erikson even set foot on North American shores centuries earlier. History books often erase these facts, favoring a simpler story. Science through archaeology shows settlements like Cahokia and Vinland existed long before Columbus sailed. Truth is complex but fascinating. Chapter 2. Napoleon was not as short as cartoons make him out to be. Records show he was around 5'7", average for his time. The myth comes from confusion between French and English measuring units. Even so, this rumor shaped how generations saw him as a tiny man with big ambitions. Historical records, paintings, and letters tell a very different story. Height didn't define his impact. Strategy and vision did. Chapter 3. You've heard the Great Wall of China is visible from space. Technically, it's not. Astronauts confirm it's nearly impossible to see with the naked eye from orbit. The myth started centuries ago as a symbol of human achievement. Science shows its width and color blend into the landscape. But that doesn't make it any less impressive. History is often more subtle than the legends we love to repeat. Chapter 4. Vikings wore horned helmets. Wrong. No evidence exists that real Viking warriors ever wore horns in battle. This myth began with 19th century operas, costumes, and paintings. Archaeology confirms helmets were practical, round, and metal, designed to protect. Horned helmets were theater props, yet the image persists in movies and pop culture. Truth can be stranger and more practical than myth. Chapter 5. Marie Antoinette never said, "Let them eat cake." This line was attributed to her decades after her death. It reflects a rumor designed to portray her as indifferent to suffering. Historical research. Chapter 6. The medieval people did not believe the earth was flat. Scholars since antiquity knew it was round. The flat earth story was popularized in the 19th century to make the Middle Ages seem ignorant. Astronomy and navigation had already proven the Earth's shape centuries earlier. Misconceptions can persist if repeated often enough. History teaches that assumptions are fragile and truth requires evidence. Chapter 7. The pyramids of Giza were not built by slaves. Archaeologists found workers were paid laborers, living in nearby villages with proper food and housing. Tombs of workers even indicate respect for their contribution. The old narrative came from misread ancient texts and Hollywood films. Engineering marvels don't always require oppression. Knowledge, organization, and time did the heavy lifting. Science and archaeology uncover these hidden truths. Chapter 8. Einstein did not fail math in school. This myth is false and widely spread. Historical records show he excelled in math and physics from a young age. Misunderstandings likely arose from differences in grading systems and childhood reports. The story persists because it comforts those who struggle academically, giving hope through a miracle narrative. Reality, genius often involves curiosity, persistence, and passion, not just luck. Chapter 9. You've heard witches were burned for evil acts. Often, they were women accused due to superstition, fear, or power struggles. Trials like the Salem witch trials were social and political, not magical. Forensic and historical research shows many accusations were baseless, fueled by paranoia. Science and reason gradually dismantled these myths. History exposes fear, control, and injustice behind dramatic legends. Chapter 10. The myth that Vikings discovered America alone ignores other explorers. Norse sagas, archaeological evidence, and indigenous oral histories show a richer story of contact. Vikings reached Newfoundland, but other civilizations sailed, traded, and thrived independently. European textbooks often highlight the first European to simplify stories. Science, archaeology, and anthropology show history is layered, with overlapping discoveries and cultures shaping the world long before famous names. Chapter 11. The myth that the Middle Ages were dark ignores cultural and scientific progress. Universities, Gothic architecture, and early mechanical clocks flourished. Medicine, astronomy, and philosophy grew, even if slowly. Dark Ages is a misleading term, popularized by Renaissance writers to glorify their own era. Science of history shows progress isn't always linear. Complexity, innovation, and human creativity existed even when textbooks simplify the story. Chapter 12. The American Wild West was not a non-stop shootout zone. Most towns were peaceful, and famous gunfights were rare. Media and dime novels exaggerated violence for entertainment. Lawmen, settlers, and communities worked together to maintain order. Archaeology and historical records reveal real towns were busy with trade, farming, and social life. The legend persists because drama sells better than reality. Chapter 13. Napoleon did not escape from Elba disguised as a commoner. His return to power in 1815 was strategic, planned, and widely supported by troops and citizens. Myths of sneaky escapes oversimplify events. Political science and historical accounts show charisma, timing, and alliances drove his comeback. Stories often turn nuanced history into thrilling tales, losing the deeper lessons. Chapter 14. The Vikings drank heavily and were mindless raiders idea is exaggerated. Evidence shows they farmed, traded, and practiced advanced craftsmanship. Archaeology finds settlements, jewelry, and tools that indicate culture and economy, not just pillage. Science teaches us to balance sensational myths with concrete evidence. Their lives were rich, complex, and human, beyond swords and helmets. Chapter 15. Cleopatra was not Egyptian. She was part of the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty, ruling Egypt after Alexander the Great's conquests. The myth of her Egyptian identity is romanticized. Coins, records, and art reveal her Greek heritage and political strategy. History often simplifies identity to make stories easier to digest. Reality blends culture, power, and personal skill in fascinating ways. Chapter 16. Medieval people did not think leeches cured everything. While leeches were used, medicine also included herbal remedies, surgery, and observation. Science and historical research show medical practice was evolving, sometimes effective, sometimes dangerous. The barbaric story exaggerates reality. Learning the truth gives respect to early science and the experimental spirit of physicians. Chapter 17. The myth that humans evolved from monkeys is wrong. Humans and monkeys share a common ancestor millions of years ago, not a direct lineage. Evolutionary biology confirms branches, adaptations, and diversity over time. Science simplifies the story to explain complex genetics. Misunderstandings persist, because simplifications spread easier than nuanced explanations. Chapter 18. The Titanic was not unsinkable. Engineers knew risks but promoted safety nets for prestige. Iceberg warnings existed, but human overconfidence and commercial pressures caused tragedy. Maritime science, design flaws, and human error combined. The story endures because it teaches hubris and humility. History, science, and tragedy often intersect in surprising ways. Chapter 19. The myth of the first man on the moon. Being a lone hero ignores thousands of people behind Apollo 11. Engineers, scientists, and astronauts made it possible. Science and teamwork drove the achievement, not just one person. Popular culture often highlights a single figure for simplicity. Reality shows collaborative human ingenuity, not isolated heroism. Chapter 20. The legend of the Trojan horse is not fully factual. Archaeology suggests Troy experienced war and destruction, but the exact horse story may be poetic exaggeration. Ancient texts blend myth, history, and symbolism. Science and excavation help separate fact from fiction. Legends endure because storytelling captures imagination, but evidence tells a richer, layered history. Chapter 21. The myth that the Great Fire of London destroyed the city entirely is false. Only a small portion burned, while many homes and churches survived. Propaganda and exaggeration later painted total devastation. Archaeology confirms the scale of destruction was significant but not absolute. Science and historical evidence show disasters are often less dramatic than legend, yet they reshape societies in real ways. Chapter 22. You were told the Salem witch trials were about magic. In reality, they were fueled by social tensions, property disputes, and fear of outsiders. Only a few accused admitted to witchcraft under pressure. Historical research shows politics, economics, and paranoia, not supernatural powers, drove the events. Science of forensics and sociology helps uncover the truth behind terrifying myths. Chapter 23. The myth that Julius Caesar said, "Et tu, Brute," is theatrical, not historical. Ancient texts suggest he might have said nothing at all during his assassination. Shakespeare popularized the phrase for drama. Science of historical research, comparing sources and translations, reveals how storytelling often distorts facts. History is rarely as poetic as plays, but still gripping. Chapter 24. The story that Vikings only looted and destroyed ignores their trade networks. They sailed to Byzantium, the Middle East, and North Africa, exchanging goods, culture, and knowledge. Archaeology uncovers coins, tools, and art from faraway lands. Science reveals how interconnected ancient civilizations were. Simplified myths erase this global perspective. Vikings were traders as much as warriors. Chapter 25. Napoleon did not die from stomach cancer alone. Recent studies suggest a combination of illness and possible arsenic exposure, though the exact cause remains debated. History often simplifies death to create closure. Science, forensic studies, and letters show the complexity of his final years. Reality is rarely clean or simple, even for famous figures. Chapter 26. The myth that medieval people thought the Earth was the center of the universe is exaggerated. Scholars like Copernicus, Ptolemy, and Islamic astronomers studied planetary motion long before Galileo. Geocentric models were not universal ignorance, but attempts to explain complex observations. Science and historical research show that knowledge was evolving gradually, not suddenly wrong. Chapter 27. The story that Leonardo da Vinci invented the parachute is partially true. He designed a pyramid-shaped parachute concept, but practical tests happened centuries later. His notebooks show imagination ahead of technology. History often credits first inventions, but science shows innovation is incremental, with ideas building over time. Myth simplifies this messy process. Chapter 28. The myth that the Spanish Inquisition killed millions is inflated. Research shows numbers were in the tens of thousands, far lower than popular imagination. Fear and propaganda exaggerated brutality. Science and careful historical analysis help reveal the truth. Cruelty existed, but the scale and context were often distorted. Numbers matter when telling history. Chapter 29. The belief that the Wright brothers invented flight alone ignores global efforts. Others, like Otto Lilienthal and Alberto Santos Dumont, also contributed to aviation. Science and experimentation across continents built powered flight. Myths highlight heroes but erase networks of inventors. True history celebrates collective progress, not just one famous pair. Chapter 30. You were told the Berlin Wall fell overnight. In reality, it involved months of protests, political tension, and government negotiation. Science of political systems, sociology, and eyewitness accounts show change is gradual, even when media presents sudden triumphs. The dramatic moment of breaking barriers is iconic, but the buildup matters just as much. Chapter 31. The myth that medieval peasants lived in constant filth is false. Archaeology shows villages had organized streets, sanitation systems, and clean water sources. Life was hard, yes, but not as dirty as stories suggest. Science and excavation reveal daily life included hygiene, cooking, and social routines. Legends of filth exaggerate to dramatize hardship, but reality was structured and surprisingly advanced. Chapter 32. The idea that the Cold War was just a battle of spies is misleading. It was also about economics, ideology, and science. Space race, nuclear arms, and propaganda played bigger roles than cloak and dagger missions. Historical records show strategy, technology, and diplomacy shaped decades of tension. Myths of espionage simplify a complex struggle, ignoring the intellectual and scientific battles behind the headlines. Chapter 33. The myth that the First Crusades were purely religious ignores politics, land, and economics. Nobles sought wealth, influence, and security. Science of archaeology and document analysis shows crusaders interacted with local cultures, traded, and adopted new knowledge. Simplifying the Crusades as only holy war erases the complexity of medieval geopolitics. History is rarely one-dimensional. Chapter 34. You were told that ancient Rome collapsed because of barbarian invasions alone. Economic problems, political corruption, climate change, and disease played key roles. Archaeology and climate science reveal long-term pressures weakened the empire. Legends focus on dramatic attacks, but reality shows multi-layered causes. History teaches that collapse is rarely sudden. It builds over centuries. Chapter 35. The myth that witches in Europe were always women ignores men accused of sorcery. Trials targeted anyone who threatened power structures or social norms. Historical records show both genders suffered. Science of gender studies and sociology reveals how fear, superstition, and patriarchy fueled myths. Reality is more nuanced than simple tales of female villainy. Chapter 36. The story that Galileo dropped balls from the Leaning Tower of Pisa may never have happened. Accounts are likely dramatized to illustrate his experiments on gravity. Physics and historical research show he tested motion scientifically, but the tower's story is symbolic. Science often inspires legends, blending evidence with storytelling. Reality is impressive without exaggeration. Chapter 37. The myth that the Egyptian pyramids were built by aliens is baseless. Archaeology confirms human labor, planning, and ingenuity. Simple machines, organization, and thousands of workers created these structures. Science proves the marvels were human achievements. Legends of extraterrestrials diminish human skill and erase centuries of engineering knowledge. True wonder lies in human innovation. Chapter 38. The idea that Christopher Columbus discovered America ignores millions of indigenous people living here. Norse explorers like Leif Erikson also arrived centuries earlier. Historical records, archaeology, and anthropology show complex societies predated European arrival. Science helps correct myths that erase voices and cultures. Discovery is rarely one person's story. Chapter 39. The myth that the French Revolution instantly freed everyone is false. Violence, instability, and inequality continued for years. Science of political history shows reforms took time and power struggles persisted. Myths of sudden liberation dramatize events, but overlook the gradual, messy reality of societal change. Revolution is a process, not a single moment. Chapter 40. You were told the Boston Tea Party was just about tea. In reality, it symbolized taxation without representation, economic protest, and colonial resistance. Science of economics and political history reveals trade, revenue, and power dynamics behind the rebellion. Myths simplify acts of protest, but the deeper story shows strategy, risk, and political awareness. Chapter 41. The myth that the Magna Carta immediately gave freedom to all is false. It mainly protected the rights of nobles, not common people. Science of legal history shows it laid the foundation for rule of law, slowly influencing later reforms. Legends simplify its impact, but the truth is gradual progress and evolving justice. History is about steps forward, not instant liberation. Chapter 42. The story that the Trojan War happened exactly as Homer wrote is misleading. Archaeology confirms a city called Troy existed, but epic details are poetic. Science, excavation, and cross-cultural studies reveal battles, trade, and politics shaped the legend. Myth mixes fiction with reality to create timeless stories. Historical truth is layered, rich, and far more complex. Chapter 43. The myth that Vikings only lived in cold, harsh lands is exaggerated. Archaeology shows settled. Chapter 45. The myth that the American Civil War was only about slavery oversimplifies complex causes. States' rights, economics, and political tensions also played roles. Science of history, political theory, and economics shows multiple factors fueled conflict. Slavery was central morally, but understanding all dynamics gives a complete picture. History is rarely a single cause story. Chapter 46. You were told Marie Curie faced only gender bias. While true, you were told Marie Curie faced only gender bias. She also battled scientific skepticism and funding struggles. Science shows her resilience and methodical experiments in radioactivity. Legends sometimes reduce achievement to a simple fight, ignoring discipline, data, and experimentation. History celebrates persistence, evidence, and curiosity alongside social challenges. Chapter 46. You were told Marie Curie faced only gender bias. While true, she also battled scientific skepticism and funding struggles. Science shows her resilience and methodical experiments in radioactivity. Legends sometimes reduce achievement to a simple fight, ignoring discipline, data, and experimentation. History celebrates persistence, evidence, and curiosity alongside social challenges. Chapter 47. The myth that knights always wore shiny armor and rode proudly into battle is misleading. Archaeology shows armor was heavy, scratched, and practical. Battles were chaotic, messy, and dangerous. Science of metallurgy and historical accounts reveal endurance and strategy mattered more than appearance. Legends romanticize chivalry, but reality was gritty, harsh, and strategic. Chapter 48. The belief that the Dark Ages lacked knowledge ignores monasteries, scholars, and libraries. Science, medicine, astronomy, and architecture thrived quietly. Misunderstanding arises from later narratives exaggerating backwardness. History shows knowledge persisted, adapted, and survived. Myths of ignorance erase human ingenuity that kept culture alive through turbulent times. Chapter 49. The story that medieval kings ruled absolutely ignores councils, courts, and noble influence. Science of political systems shows shared power, negotiation, and compromise existed. Legends dramatize monarchs as omnipotent, but history reveals checks, balances, and human limitations. Authority was complex, often constrained by society and tradition, not just royal whim. Chapter 50. The myth that ancient Egyptians worshipped cats exclusively is false. Cats were revered, yes, but their religion included gods, rituals, and philosophy. Archaeology and hieroglyphs reveal complex belief systems. Science of Egyptology shows myths simplify culture, but true history celebrates human creativity, spirituality, and symbolism. Reverence for cats is fascinating, but only part of a rich civilization. Chapter 51. The myth that the Roman Colosseum was only for gladiator fights is false. It hosted naval reenactments, theatrical plays, and public events. Archaeology and historical records show complex engineering and social planning. Science of architecture and hydraulics reveals Romans were brilliant innovators. Legends reduce it to violence, but reality celebrates creativity, organization, and spectacle in society. Chapter 52. The idea that the Berlin Wall instantly divided families ignores years of policy, planning, and tension. Many crossed safely before 1961. Others endured years of separation. Science of political history and eyewitness accounts shows barriers are built gradually, with lasting social impact. Myths dramatize the fall, but the story is longer, nuanced, and human. Chapter 53. The myth that the French Revolution was purely violent overlooks Enlightenment ideas and reform efforts. Science, economics, and political thought shaped the rebellion. Violence existed, but philosophical debate, new constitutions, and societal change were equally important. Legends focus on guillotines. History shows thinking, strategy, and vision as driving forces. Revolution is brains and action combined. Chapter 54. The story that Vikings had no laws is false. Legal codes, assemblies called things, and conflict resolution existed. Science of anthropology and archaeology confirms complex governance, property rights, and community justice. Legends emphasize chaos, but reality shows order, negotiation, and societal structure guided Viking life. Law existed, even in raiding cultures. Chapter 55. The myth that humans always hunted with stone jewels ignores early innovation. Bone, wood, and later metals were equally important. Science of archaeology shows tool evolution was adaptive, creative, and region-specific. Legends simplify human ingenuity into stones, but reality shows experimentation, learning, and cultural transmission drove survival and progress. Early humans were inventors. Chapter 56. The myth that Christopher Columbus proved the world was round is wrong. Educated Europeans already knew Earth's shape. His voyage proved size and scale, not shape. Science of geography, astronomy, and navigation confirms misconceptions about discovery. Myths persist because stories need drama, but reality is learning, calculation, and courage in action. Knowledge existed before fame. Chapter 57. The story that the Taj Mahal is only a tomb ignores its architectural innovation, gardens, and symbolism. Science of engineering, geometry, and art history reveals complex planning and aesthetics. Legends reduce it to love stories, but reality shows cultural achievement, labor organization, and human creativity. History is more than romance. It is skill and vision. Chapter 58. The myth that the Wright brothers alone invented flight overshadows others' contributions. Science, experimentation, and observation from many pioneers made powered flight possible. Collaboration, adaptation, and persistence mattered more than single credit. Legends highlight a duo, but innovation is networked, cumulative, and global. Aviation is a story of shared human curiosity. Chapter 59. The belief that Napoleon was universally hated is false. Many admired his reforms, legal codes, and leadership. Science of sociology and history shows public perception is nuanced, shaped by propaganda, geography, and politics. Legends simplify villains and heroes, but reality reveals mixed support, complex society, and human judgment. Popularity is relative, not absolute. Chapter 60. The myth that the Boston Tea Party was only protest theater ignores strategic planning, timing, and political calculation. Science of history, economics, and strategy shows rebels used symbolic acts to unite public opinion. Legends make it dramatic, but truth highlights intelligence, planning, and risk management behind iconic events. History rewards understanding context over spectacle. Chapter 61. The myth that ancient Greek democracy included everyone is false. Only male citizens could vote, while women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded. Science of political history shows early democracy was experimental, limited, and evolving. Legends oversimplify freedom, but reality teaches that inclusion was partial and progress took centuries. History is messy, not idealized. Chapter 62. The story that the Black Death killed half of Europe is exaggerated. Estimates show 30 to 40% mortality, varying by region. Science of epidemiology, archaeology, and historical records clarifies impact. Myths inflate numbers for drama, but the pandemic reshaped society, labor, and economy regardless. Reality shows devastation with nuance, not just horror stories. Chapter 63. The myth that the pyramids were built in one lifetime is false. Chapter 64. The belief that King Arthur was purely fictional ignores possible historical figures and Celtic legends. Science of archaeology and textual analysis shows inspirations for castles, battles, and leadership exist. Legends blend myth and fact, teaching values and culture. History is often a story of layers, where imagination intersects with reality. Chapter 65. The myth that the Industrial Revolution immediately improved life is false. Harsh working conditions, child labor, and pollution persisted for decades. Science of economics, sociology, and labor history reveals gradual improvement over time. Legends celebrate invention and progress, but reality shows struggle, adaptation, and resilience. Change takes effort, not magic. Chapter 66. The story that Cleopatra was only a seductress is misleading. Science of history, coinage, and political documents shows she was a shrewd diplomat, scholar, and ruler. Legends focus on romance, ignoring intelligence, governance, and strategy. History reveals human complexity. Women in power manage survival, alliances, and statecraft, not just charm. Chapter 67. The myth that medieval people believed in magic over medicine exaggerates superstition. Herbal remedies, surgery, and hygiene were practiced widely. Science of medical history shows experimentation, observation, and trial and error shaped healing. Legends simplify fear, but reality includes rational thinking, adaptation, and learning. Medicine evolved long before modern science. Chapter 68. The myth that the Cold War was only a standoff between the US and USSR ignores allies, colonies, and global politics. Science of history, diplomacy, and economics shows multiple nations influenced outcomes. Legends create simple rivalries, but reality involves networks, strategy, and interconnected global systems. Human decisions were more complex than stories suggest. Chapter 69. The story that the Great Wall of China kept out all invaders is false. Nomadic groups penetrated it multiple times. Science of archaeology and military history shows walls were deterrents, not impenetrable shields. Legends exaggerate security, but reality shows strategy, adaptation, and human ingenuity in defense. Defense is never absolute. It evolves with time. Chapter 70. The myth that the American West was lawless ignores settlers, sheriffs, and community councils. Science of history and sociology shows order, negotiation, and social norms shaped society. Legends of constant gunfights entertain, but reality highlights daily life, commerce, and survival. Civilization was practical, not just dramatic. Chapter 71. The myth that the Renaissance was only about art ignores science, mathematics, and engineering. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci blended creativity with experimentation. Science and history show discoveries in anatomy, astronomy, and mechanics flourished alongside painting and sculpture. Legends focus on beauty, but reality celebrates curiosity, analysis, and innovation. Knowledge and imagination advanced together. Chapter 72. The story that knights always followed chivalric codes is misleading. Honor mattered, but survival, politics, and strategy often dictated behavior. Science of medieval history shows compromise, negotiation, and pragmatism shaped actions. Legends romanticize idealism, but reality was strategic, sometimes brutal, and far from perfect. True history balances morality and practicality. Chapter 73. The myth that the French Revolution instantly freed women is false. Legal and political rights were limited despite social activism. Science of political history shows gradual change over decades. Legends dramatize emancipation, but reality reveals struggle, negotiation, and incremental progress. Social reform is a process, not a single event. Chapter 74. The belief that the Salem witch trials were about supernatural belief alone ignores social, economic, and political pressures. Families, property disputes, and fear drove accusations. Science of sociology and history reveals panic, manipulation, and injustice shaped events. Legends focus on witches. Reality shows power, suspicion, and human complexity. Chapter 75. The myth that the pyramids were built by slaves ignores evidence of paid, respected workers. Archaeology reveals housing, food, and tombs honoring laborers. Science shows organization, engineering, and logistics, not oppression, created monuments. Legends oversimplify, but reality celebrates human ingenuity, collaboration, and dedication. Great achievements come from collective effort. Chapter 76. The story that Vikings only raided is false. Science and archaeology show trade, settlement, and cultural exchange across Europe. Legends exaggerate violence, ignoring exploration, craftsmanship, and diplomacy. Viking history teaches adaptability, networks, and human creativity. Raiders were also farmers, traders, and navigators, blending survival with opportunity. Chapter 77. The myth that the Colosseum was only for gladiators oversimplifies Roman society. Science of architecture and records reveals theater, naval simulations, and civic events. Legends emphasize bloodshed. Reality shows engineering brilliance, social planning, and entertainment complexity. Romans designed spaces for spectacle, communication, and organization. Public life was layered, not one-dimensional. Chapter 78. The belief that the Great Fire of London destroyed everything is exaggerated. Science and historical documents show only parts burned, while most structures survived. Legends dramatize disaster. Reality highlights resilience, rebuilding, and urban planning. History shows communities adapt, learn, and rebuild, often stronger than myths suggest. Chapter 79. The myth that Columbus proved the Earth was round is false. Educated Europeans already knew. Science of navigation, astronomy, and geography shows his voyage revealed new lands, not shape. Legends simplify discovery. Reality emphasizes calculation, courage, and curiosity. Exploration builds on prior knowledge, not magical insight. Chapter 80. The story that Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake," is false. Historical research shows no evidence she did. Legends exaggerate callousness. Reality reveals complex politics, charity, and court life. Science of historical method highlights propaganda, misattribution, and rumor shaping public perception. Truth is richer than myth. Chapter 81. The myth that the Dark Ages were dark ignores knowledge preserved in monasteries, libraries, and Islamic scholarship. Science of history shows medicine, astronomy, and architecture advanced steadily. Legends simplify ignorance, but reality reveals survival, adaptation, and intellectual continuity. Knowledge persisted, even when society faced turmoil, proving human curiosity never sleeps. Chapter 82. The story that the Wright brothers invented flight alone ignores global contributions. Science, observation, and experimentation by many pioneers made powered flight possible. Legends credit 2 men, but reality highlights collaboration, incremental innovation, and shared human curiosity. Aviation evolved through teamwork, failure, and persistence. Chapter 83. The myth that the Cold War was just a US-USSR standoff overlooks global politics. Science of history, diplomacy, and economics shows many nations influenced events. Legends simplify rivalries. Reality involves complex networks, alliances, and human decision-making. Understanding systems, not just leaders, reveals the true struggle. Chapter 84. The myth that the Industrial Revolution instantly improved life is false. Science of economics and social history shows child labor, poor housing, and pollution persisted. Legends exaggerate prosperity. Reality highlights struggle, adaptation, and gradual improvement. Human progress is messy, not instantaneous. Chapter 85. The story that medieval knights always followed chivalry ignores pragmatism and survival. Science and historical records show strategy, negotiation, and politics often guided actions. Legends romanticize honor. Reality is gritty, tactical, and human. True history balances ideals with necessity. Chapter 86. The myth that Julius Caesar said et tu, Brute is theatrical. Science of ancient texts shows he may have said nothing. Legends dramatize betrayal. Reality relies on interpretation, translation, and analysis. History is often subtler than stories suggest. Chapter 87. The belief that Vikings had no culture is false. Archaeology shows art, trade, and settlements. Legends focus on raiding. Reality highlights innovation, exploration, and adaptability. Vikings were builders, navigators, and merchants as much as warriors. Chapter 88. The myth that Napoleon was universally hated ignores admiration for reforms and leadership. Science of history and sociology shows public perception varied. Legends simplify villains. Reality shows nuanced opinions, political influence, and human complexity. Chapter 89. The story that Cleopatra was only a seductress ignores her intelligence and political skill. Science of coinage, records, and alliances shows diplomacy and strategy mattered more than romance. Legends reduce power to charm. Reality celebrates leadership, knowledge, and influence. Chapter 90. The myth that the Titanic was unsinkable is false. Science of engineering and historical records shows risks were known. Legends dramatize heroism. Reality teaches caution, planning, and human error. History blends triumph and tragedy, not myths of invincibility. Chapter 91. The myth that the Berlin Wall instantly divided families ignores years of tension, planning, and policy. Science of history and eyewitness accounts shows gradual separation and adaptation. Legends dramatize the wall. Reality highlights long-term social, emotional, and political effects. Change is rarely sudden. Chapter 92. The story that the Boston Tea Party was just a protest over tea oversimplifies history. Science of political and economic context shows taxation, representation, and strategy motivated rebels. Legends focus on drama. Reality reveals planning, communication, and calculated risk. Symbols matter, but action is deliberate. Chapter 93. The myth that medieval peasants were always poor and starving exaggerates hardship. Archaeology shows organized villages, clean water, and daily routines. Science reveals work, trade, and community structure provided stability. Legends dramatize struggle. Reality celebrates human adaptability and ingenuity. Life was challenging, but not chaotic. Chapter 94. The story that the Trojan War happened exactly as Homer wrote is misleading. Archaeology shows Troy existed, but epic details are poetic. Science and textual analysis reveal politics, trade, and local conflict-inspired myths. Legends shape culture. Reality shapes understanding. Chapter 95. The myth that ancient Egyptians only worshipped cats is false. Science of Egyptology shows complex religious beliefs, rituals, and gods. Cats were revered but not central. Legends simplify culture. Reality reveals philosophy, symbolism, and devotion in human life. Chapter 96. The belief that the Great Fire of London destroyed all is exaggerated. Science and records show only parts burned. Most buildings survived. Legends dramatize disaster. Reality highlights resilience, reconstruction, and urban planning. Communities adapted and rebuilt, stronger than myths suggest. Chapter 97. The story that the Colosseum was just for gladiators oversimplifies Roman society. Science of architecture and records reveals theatrical plays, naval reenactments, and civic events. Legends focus on violence. Reality shows social planning, engineering, and entertainment complexity. Public life was layered. Chapter 98. The myth that Marie Curie faced only gender bias ignores scientific skepticism, funding struggles, and experimental challenges. Science of history highlights her methodical work in radioactivity. Legends oversimplify. Reality shows persistence, rigor, and curiosity alongside social barriers. Chapter 99. The story that Vikings were only raiders ignores trade, settlements, and cultural exchange. Archaeology shows networks, craftsmanship, and diplomacy. Legends exaggerate violence. Reality highlights exploration, innovation, and adaptability. Vikings were builders and navigators, not just warriors. Chapter 100. The myth that Columbus discovered America erases indigenous peoples and prior explorers like Leif Erikson. Science of archaeology and anthropology shows complex civilizations existed long before 1492. Legends simplify discovery. Reality celebrates multiple cultures, resilience, and human exploration. History is a tapestry, not a single thread. History is more complex, fascinating, and surprising than myths suggest. The stories we inherit are often simplified or exaggerated, but the truth is richer and more inspiring. Remember, questioning what you've been told is the first step to understanding the past and the world around you.